welcome back to our channel. This is Science Lectures 256. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow us on our social media handles. That is at X at Science Lectures 256 and on WhatsApp at Science Lectures 256. So we are still continuing with our series of a discipline of developmental studies. And today we are going to look at the theories of developmental studies. But before we look at the theories, what is a theory? A theory is a particular way of seeing an idea or a phenomena. A theory is a particular way of seeing an idea or a phenomena. That is why most theories are personal based. They are personal based. Somebody argues that according to my eyes, or according to my understanding, according to my thinking, I think this is this and this. And however, theories must be backed up by facts. That is why we always have presentation of evidence at the end of every theory. And in developmental studies, various theories have been postulated to define what development is, as it is in other fields. Those guys that do law have the libertarian theories and other theories. In international relations, there is the economic stability theory and the likes. So even here in developmental studies, just like in science, we have theories that try to define what development is. And they are majorly three. And the rest of other theories radiate from these three. That is the neoliberalism theory, neoliberalism theory, that is number one. Number two is the modernization theory, and the dependency theory. So these three theories play the vital description of what developmental studies means. The rest just radiate, deviate, support, or disagree with these three major theories. And today for our discussion, we are going to look at the modernization theory. So this theory bloomed around 1950s, 1960s, 1950s, around 1960s, and one of its proponents and one of the most famous one was Professor W. Russell. Or the other scientists like Samuel Huntington, but this one was very important. And before we venture up into the theory, this professor was a very good student, and he believed in Karl Marx and his theory that he postulated in A Communist Manifesto of 1948, as we shall be discussing later. Yes, so he tried to define development using 5 stages, as we shall be seeing them later. So today we want to look at the modernization theory. In this theory says that for a country or a state or a nation or an individual to be called developed, they must transit from a traditional society. To a modern society. And he says, the proponents or the school of thought of this theory, they say that the South is largely underdeveloped, because of their traditions. The South is largely underdeveloped because of their traditions, and they have nobody to blame. That countries in the South, as we discussed earlier, we talked of the South, that they are largely underdeveloped because of their own making. They are the ones that dictate that we are supposed to be underdeveloped. That is what the proponents or the school of thought of this theory state. And they try to give reasons why they thought that the South was largely dependent or was largely responsible for its underdevelopment. So they say that our society is still traditional. So let's look at the characteristics of traditional societies. Characteristics of traditional societies. Traditional societies. Now these characteristics are some of the reasons. It is the blame that they are putting, that they came up with, that has developed, has hindered themselves from proceeding from a traditional society to a modern society. The school of thought for this theory, for them, they believe that so long as you can move away from your traditional way of doing things and you proceed to the advanced one, you are developed. For example, if you leave an agro-based industry and you go to an industrial-based industry, a manufacturing industry, not an agro-based industry, in their eyes you are considered developed. So what are some of the reasons that they gave that are responsible for the underdevelopment of the South? Number one, superstitions. That the members of the South, they are always superstitious, that everything that happens, they attach it to a spiritual being. For example, somebody falls sick, somebody is bewitching me. Somebody fails to get a job, somebody is bewitching me. Somebody fails to go to work, somebody is bewitching me. That every weakness is blamed on a supernatural being or a spiritual being. So how does this hinder development? Whenever people are highly superstitious, they fail and lose the quest for knowledge and try to always have excuses to blame for their incompetences. And as you know that development of a nation begins with an individual. Whenever you and I fail to develop, there is no way our nation shall develop. So people tend to look for excuses instead of looking for solutions to see them that they progress from one level to another. By superstitious, that they attach every happening to a spiritual being. On top of being superstitious, members of these traditional societies are poor at planning. They are poor at planning. And the planning begins from from an individual level up to a national level. You hear that the roads are not enough to facilitate movement of people. The hospitals are not enough to accommodate all patients. Yet at the end of the day, we have people that are in charge of planning. So we are very poor at our planning. They construct a road within 1, 2, 3 years, they are repairing it. Yet, even when they do the planning, there is disrespect of the plans. There is disrespect of the plans. There is, for example, a road, a contract is given out to construct a road, and the road is supposed to be done in 2 years. However, the road takes another 60 years. That there is a lot of wastage of resources, wastage of time, and maybe inhibiting other plans. And when other plans are inhibited, there is no development, according to these people who thought about this theory. So they say that we are very poor at planning. On top of that, there is disrespect of plannings. Yet planning is very needed, or it is very vital for the development, because it gives you a certain level of predictability. You can be able to tell that if in such and such a time I have accomplished such and such a thing, the next 2 years maybe I'm going to be doing this and that. So you plan accordingly and you can predict what is coming in the future. It gives you predictability and confidence. Yes, since you have a plan, you're like, in 2 years I'm going to be doing this. So you gain the confidence and make sure you achieve whatever you have planned to do. But whenever you don't have any planning, the predictability and confidence is lost, and it is characterized by wastage of resources, and time. So, on top of being poor at planning, we have what they call feudal structures. So, the feudal structures, or what they call feudalism. Here is where you have huge chunks of resources being owned by a group of people. Huge chunks of resources being owned by a big group of people. For example, a king owning over very many hectares of land. In Europe previously, we had the nobles owning very huge chunks of land. Yet, and the people who were always there on those chunks of land were workers. So how did this prevent development? Since people are not certain, or since people do not have ownership of those resources, they fail to come up with ideas that are very vital for development. A person who would be like, maybe let me construct a hotel here and I attract people to come and maybe work, bring in money. They can't come up with such ideas since they are not the owners, and their sustainability and living there tomorrow is not granted, and that prevents the development. Then, on top of the feudal structures, there is dictatorship. So, in some of the definitions of dictatorship is when absolute power, remember they say power corrupts, but absolute power corrupts the mind. So, absolute power is held by an individual. Absolute power is held by an individual. If not an individual, it's held by a small group of people. A small group of people. Small group of people. So, whenever such happens, we shall encounter things like disrespect of human rights. Disrespect of human rights. Disrespect of human rights. Then it shall also like things like disrespect of democracy. Disrespect of democracy. Disrespect of democracy. If you're very observant, most of the underdeveloped countries, especially in the South, tend to have that problem of disrespect of human rights and disrespect of democracy. Then, still dictatorship is characterized by what they call amorphacy, bureaucracy, and flow of commands, So bureaucracy, you have to move from one office to another in order to attain a specific service. And flow of commands, for example, I am the president. I will always be calling so and so who is in charge of a certain government organization, giving him commands. But after some time, maybe one of my assistants, with his or her personal gains, decides to use my voice as an instrument to realize his or her own gains. That is very bad, and it hinders development, because that will see the diversion of a lot of resources that are responsible for nation building and development being diverted to personal gains and real accumulation of personal wealth. That is how dictatorship has prevented development of the South. Then, status in these traditional societies, status is ascribed, but not achieved. So people end up in certain position not because of merit, but they are put there because of affirmative action, because of tribalism, because of nepotism. So this also hinders development, because most of the times people that end up in such positions are incompetent for those positions, and there is no way you can expect somebody who is unqualified for a certain position to administer an effective resource. So that is how status ascribing and not achieving hinders the development in the nations of the South. Then, still these traditional societies are characterized by subsistence production. So subsistence production is when you produce for your own consumption. As we shall be discussing later, W.W. Rousseau says, or Rostov says that the fifth stage, which is the stage of high mass consumption, that members of the developed society are no longer worried about having food for tomorrow, having where to sleep for tomorrow. They divert that energy that would have been used to worry about those things to other things like, how do I go survive on the moon? Or how do I go and survive under water? Their brains are thinking about how to come up with new ideas. But since members of the South or members in these traditional societies, their worries are only about what am I going to eat tomorrow? How am I going to survive tomorrow? moral. They tend to undergo subsistence production. On top of the subsistence production, they tend to use poor technology. Poor technology. Poor technology. The poor technology, for example, you find a farmer using a hoe to cultivate over 3 hectares of land. Yet in the developed or modernized societies, people tend to have tractors. People tend to have combined harvesters. People tend to use machines for irrigating. But you find somebody having an irrigating can. That is also a problem, and it hinders development, because there is no way you can expect somebody who carries out subsistence production and using poor technology competing with somebody who uses advanced technology. Advanced technology and producing goods on a large scale. The dichotomy between the two is what we call false analogy. Then on top of that, we have backward cultures. Members of the traditional societies have backward cultures. Backward cultures. Things like polygamy. Things like female genital mutilation. But let's talk about polygamy. How does polygamy prevent development? You find a man who can't even manage to earn $1 a day, having over 6 wives. On top of the 6 wives, each of the wife has 3 children. So you find the man has to struggle to look for half $1 and has to share it all among his family members. So you find that such men rarely have surplus, which surplus can be used to invest in other developmental programs, and people end up living in the same position year in, year out, because most of the resources are spent on the home, are spent on the family, and there is no surplus that can be used for development. Then still, these traditional societies are characterized by a cyclic nature of life. A cyclic nature of life. Cyclic nature of life. One of the authors says that members in the traditional societies are like Christians. Christ yesterday, Christ today, Christ forever. They want to do things the same way, that as Christ was yesterday, he is today, and he will be forever. Yet, in advanced societies, things change. For example, you find somebody who always wanted to dig his coffee using a hoe. Even today, he wants the child to dig the coffee using a hoe. Even he wants the grandchildren to dig the coffee using a hoe. Yet the world has gone past that stage, and people need to diversify. You find somebody who was very good at distilling alcohol, wants the children to also continue distilling alcohol. He also wants the grandchildren to continue distilling alcohol. That tends to limit diversity. Yet diversity is what conglomerates to contribute to define what we call development. So people want to do things the same way repeatedly for very many generations, and since there is no variation, there is no development. There is no development. Lastly, these traditional societies are characterized by poor time management. Poor time management. Poor time management. You tell somebody we have a meeting at 12 p.m. but somebody comes at 3 p.m. Yet we know very well that all development, everything on this world runs on time. If time is misused, there is nothing that can proceed. And since there is nothing that can proceed, there can't be anything we call development. There can't be anything we call development. So those are some of the characteristics of traditional societies. Poor planning, and on top of the planning there is disrespect of plans, the cyclic nature of life, doing things the same way repeatedly, poor time management, status being ascribed that don't achieve, people held positions just because of merit, the feudal structures, dictatorship, their subsistence production, and backward cultures. Characteristics of traditional societies, and the members or the proponents of the modernization theory say that some of these are the factors that have inhibited or that have withheld the members of the South from developing, and they say that we have nobody to blame. We are largely responsible for our underdevelopment. However, they also suggested some solutions, some things that we could engage in that could see our transition from a traditional society to what, in their eyes, they call a modernized society. So we should look at some of the solutions. Number one, They say that we should promote education. We should promote education. One thing I didn't talk about in the characteristic, yes, some members of the society can attain education, but the education most of the times is elementary. And if it is not elementary, most of the time it is marks oriented. If it is not marks oriented, it is financial gain oriented. So you end up having people that come out of schools, yes, having a lot of knowledge, but having nowhere to apply it, because the curriculum is usually theoretical. So this number says that for anything to be called education and it is effective for development, the education system should be changed to become a more practical one, so that somebody can study, yes, and say that whatever I'm studying, I can utilize this and this to come up with an idea that will necessitate the development of my nation. Then, number 2, they suggest that every country to have an equal share of the global economy. Global economy. Global economy. So how can they have a share of the global economy? When the production changes from being subsistence to commercial and utilizing advanced technology, there shall be a lot of exports than the imports, and countries that have had a very huge export rate compared to a lower import rate have had a lot to say in the global economy. One of those examples is the country South Africa. That is why even amidst all the wars, it can still come up and say something to defend its points, because it has a lot of exports, and people, especially in the north, largely depend on the products from South Africa. So, to transit from a traditional society to a modern society, our production should change from being subsistence to commercial. And when it changes from being subsistence to commercial, we shall have a share in the global economy. When you have a say in the global economy, that means you can even set the terms of trade, and whereby we shall also benefit seeing the development of our nation. Then, they say yes, there should be borrowing. There should be borrowing of foreign aid. Borrowing of foreign aid. But if there is any borrowing of foreign aid, it should be on terms of the local society. On terms of the local society. In terms of the local society. For example, if Uganda is borrowing money from Exim Bank in China, Export and Import Bank of China, the terms that should govern the loan should be Ugandan based. Ugandan based, because at the end of the day, the money is coming to benefit Ugandans. But however, whenever chances are given and the terms of borrowing are on other, they are based on other rules that are foreign, there tends to be exploitation of resources, and at the end of the day, the loan that was seen as a blessing ends up being a curse. So that is it for the modernization theory. We've seen the blaming, what do they put forward as to blame us, as to why we failed and developed.